Who was it?
Maddie.
All right, good. At least there's one. There's one student that listens to these videos. Okay. All right, so here we go. So today we're doing the quadratic formula. It is something you have seen in Algebra 1. Hopefully you were lucky enough to be able to sing it. Okay, if y'all will close your Chromebooks, you don't need those right now. A lot of people by 7 a.m. never heard the song.
I've never heard.
Or they said that we were given an option and we chose not to sing. Well, it's not an option. Okay?
It was an assignment back in my class.
So,
They like forced us.
let me delete that. You don't need those. Here's our magical formula. Go ahead and write that down. Some teachers will say negative b. I always say opposite. Just like when we were finding the vertex, okay? I said opposite of B. But your A, B, and C come from your standard form, your A, your B, your C. Okay? And it goes a little something like this, all right? And it'll be stuck in your head. You're welcome. If you forget it, let me know. But it goes x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Thank you. Thank you. I did try out for Beard and Singers and sadly did not make it. Y'all, I can't sing. I don't know why I tried out.
They were out for 6 harmony.
They don't know.
I tried out it was so upsetting.
They don't know if they're
I was in 6.
Thank you. Okay. All right, y'all join in with me. Unless you want me to do it one more time. I'll do it one more time and then y'all can join in.
I was
Okay.
in maroon 6. They're maroon 5.
Okay, here we go. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, y'all ready?
We're gonna
Guys
hear
in the
it
back,
one
you
more
ready?
I think I would do
time. Raise the roof.
This is when my virtual class skips forward because I chit chat.
You're gonna miss hearing my voice.
Okay, here we go. All right, you ready? X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Wow.
Yeah.
That was like so. Ooh.
I mean, what do you
That's what it was. It was
I
just
can't
very.
help I'm
If you're in a classroom with sophomores to sing, I think that's probably about the best you can do.
Nah. Okay.
Caden's a singer. Caden, why don't you give us a
Yeah.
solo?
Give us a solo.
So-
You do it anyway.
So I had a student in class. Yes, I'm telling stories. I had a student in class that let's just say he wasn't the nicest kid. We'll say that. And it was his day to go,
Don't give me like
if
that.
you know what I mean. So I had told my students in all my classes that anytime a visitor would show, if you got everyone up and everyone sang the quadratic formula, I'd give you extra credit. Okay? So anytime I'd tell some teachers, hey, stop by the classroom, and like kids would say, all rise, and then they would start singing it. That's cool. So then Keys opened the door. You know what happens when the Keys open the door. Keys and 2 officers open the door. And they come in, and one of my students, sure enough, X equals opposite of B plus, and I was like, no! I was like freaking out, and I was like, no, stop! This kid's getting kicked out. I was like, you can't do this to me. And so, but yeah, he just kind of took it upon himself to start
They
singing
get extra
it.
credit.
No, because I was sweating, my face was red. I was like, you can't do this right now. But
What do you do to get them taken up?
it was more for a show effect for the extra officers that were involved. But no, it was a kid that consequence wasn't a thing for him.
Oh, so they were just taking them out.
So they were just like, hey, we'll show you.
Yeah, just like fear mongering, you know.
Yeah.
So
As you do.
it was more for effect.
As you do, too.
Um,
Yeah, minor.
Y'all know how Mrs. Hughes always says that if you're not a hawk, then you're just, right? So that comes
You
from,
would finish it that time. You just didn't want.
Daisha McBride is the one who sings
Oh,
the hawk anthem.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
on Spotify.
she was in one of my classes and she actually sent me an email after she graduated and she was in college, and she said a professor said, hey, there's anybody that right now can stand up and give me the quadratic formula, I'll give you some extra points. Sure enough, she stood straight up and she started singing it, just like we did in class. So it could come back to help you. It could. So just you wait. Let's do it one more time. Okay. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. I don't see your mouth moving. I know you're not singing. Y'all are like watermelon, watermelon, watermelon. Don't worry, we'll sing it 100 more times. Okay. Okay, let's start off with this problem. The first thing you have to check for is that it's set equal to 0. Okay? In this particular case, it is not set equal to 0. So we're going to move that 2x over. Can this be factored? Yes. Are we going to factor it? No. But the good news is if you can point out that it can be factored, you know that at the end, your answer should be pretty. You should get just some 2 numbers, okay? Here we go. X equals the opposite of b plus or minus the square root, and this is always really slow to do. B squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
You see the keys? It's that kid. He's coming back.
Yeah, I heard you.
All right.
Oh, well, I think what's funny is that all of us would do it.
Who's in trouble now? Okay.
Yeah.
It's just a slip of paper that just says Caden on it.
Actually, it does.
Oh.
So I'm a genius.
All right, so with these problems, if you don't put parentheses around your b squared, okay, so notice how this is a -2. This is when mistakes happen. So always put those parentheses around there, okay? And so if you didn't have a calculator, or if you did have a calculator, you're always going to figure out what inside the square root equals. That's going to be your next step, okay? So I'm going to look at this and I'm going to say 4 plus 12 is going to get me 16. So I'm always going to figure out what's under the radical equal to. I'm going to keep the radical there, but I'm going to figure out what under the radical equals. So then I can ask myself the question, what is the square root of 16, which conveniently is a pretty number? We are not done yet. Do not leave this as an answer, okay? So something that might help a couple of y'all out is if you write this twice, you do 2 plus 4 divided by 2, and then 2 minus 4 divided by 2. That's how you're going to solve them, okay? So 2 plus 4 divided by 2, I get 6 over 2, which gets me 3. And 2 minus 4 gets me a -2 divided by 2 is a -1. So like I said, we said it could be factored. Would have been easier? Yeah, but I'm telling you to do quadratic formula. Yeah. 100%. But you're saying like if I do 1 plus or minus 2? Absolutely. Dorito chip, one might say.
You're talking Cool Ranch.
It depends on what color you use. If it's Cool Ranch, you got to use blue, and if it's Nacho, then you got to use the orange.
I'm getting my nacho cheese.
I kind of like all of them.
I'm down for that spicy ranch.
I don't really discriminate. Okay, go ahead and set up number 1.
Don't forget the Dorito chip.
Segregation.
It's just not.
Okay, so x equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4a. Hey, c all over 2a. It's really tough to sing with a mask on. I'll lose air quickly. Okay. Inside the square root, we have negative 2 squared, which gets me 4. Then I get 4 times 4, which is 16. And that negative forces that whole thing to become a positive. If you need to write that out, actually, the steps for it, go for it. I'm doing a lot of it in my head. Some of y'all are using calculators. Some of y'all are doing it in your head as well. So that's, if you're confused about where I'm getting those numbers, that's where I'm doing it. So 4 plus 16 gets me 20. Takes us back to the first thing we learned in this chapter. We can simplify the square root of 20. What does that reduce to? 4 and 5, which gets us 2 root 5. Yes. Okay. So Dorito chip, because all 3 of these are divisible by the same thing. Notice how I'm not even touching what's inside the square root. You cannot go inside the square root. That is not an available thing for you, okay? So if I look at 2, 2, and 8, I can reduce this to 1 plus or minus. I can put the 1 there if I want to. I don't need it. The square root of 5 over 4. Okay? They're all divisible by 2, so I just divide them all by 2. Huh? That's like your old meetings that you all would have with your guidance counselors of what are you doing from here? You forget yours? Oh.
I'm a junior, so I didn't know that.
Gotcha.
I'm just confused as to what's happening. What do we just go and they're like, oh, you exist.
Your 4-year plan and she put out and you talk about
Dude, I didn't take that seriously. Why would I take that seriously?
Shocking. Okay, try number 2. I did not say that.
I did.
6 photos
Okay, moving on. Please. Try number 2.
equals opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. All over 2a. So I end up with 144 plus 880, which gets me 1024. Is 1024 a perfect square?
Yes.
Did y'all ever play that game?
Oh.
Cute game?
2048.
Yeah, 2048. 1024 was the first one, or the one right before 2048. So what is the square root of 1024? 32. Now, some people might look at this and say, oh, 4, 12, and 32 are all divisible by 4. I can simplify this down to -3 plus or minus 8. Or I can say -12 plus 32 gives me 20. Divided by 4 gets me 5. And then -12 minus 32 is -40. Well, 44. There we go. Divided by 4 gets me 11. So it doesn't matter if you want to take it down, -11, take it down further, or if you just want to go and do what you got there, okay? So, any questions so far on the quadratic formula? Anyone forget the song yet? I'd be happy to help. Oh, and it won't just be one more time.
Can you do it like an accent?
No, but I've always wanted to do it in a round, and I can't get anyone to commit with me on that. Okay, so these 3 problems, hold on, let me change all this so y'all can see it. Try all 3 of these problems, and there's a reason why all 3 of these answers are different. And then after you finish all 3, see if you can figure out what makes them different. So with solving by quadratic formula, it is very important, especially on homework and if you were also in a real life school setting where you would take a test on a normal piece of paper and use pencil kind of thing. Showing your work is huge, okay? So much can happen, just a little negative here and there, or you accidentally, instead of writing 25 up at the top, you maybe just put the 2, got distracted, lost the 5. Things happen, okay? So showing your work gets you more credit, okay? So what did y'all end up with inside the radical for the first one? 0. Okay. I guarantee about 4 of y'all in this class did the square root of 0 in your calculator just to double check that it was 0. I guarantee. Okay, some people are admitting to it. I like it. Okay, so it would be silly for us to leave that 0 there. That's like us walking around saying I'm 15 plus 0. It's not what we do. Okay, so I would just say negative 10 divided by 2, and we get negative 5. Now, a lot of people are like, wait, we're supposed to always get 2 answers. You are getting 2 answers here. And I'm going to show you graphically what that means, okay? It's called a double root. So it hits the x-axis right at that negative 5, and it bounces right off of it, okay? So down here, what did y'all end up with inside the radical for this one? 20. And if we reduce this, we have 2 plus or minus 2 root 5 over 2. So that just reduces to 1 plus or minus the square root of 5. Interesting, okay? And number 3, what did you end up with inside the radical there? Negative 8. Okay, we reduce that, we get negative 4 plus or minus 2I root 2 over 6. Dorito chip allows us to then divide all 3 of these by 2. So my final answer for that one, let me extend my page, is negative 2 plus or minus I square root of 2 over 3. Okay? So, all 3 of these answers are different. We got 1 answer. We got 2 answers. And we got 2 imaginary answers. One might say the first 2 are real. 1 real, 2 real, 2 imaginary. What do you think is going to tell us that? Without doing the entire quadratic formula, what part can we look at that tells us that information without having to solve it? Okay.
Square root.
What about the square root?
So like for the first one, it equaled like the 10 squared and the 125 both equal the same number.
Uh-huh.
We got 0.
Uh-huh.
That's only 1.
Okay.
And the second one did have a square root, so it would be 2 answers.
Okay.
And the last one ended in negative, so it would be imaginary.
Okay. Perfectly said. That's the discriminant, y'all. The discriminant, and it's on the next slide,
Oh, yeah.
is b squared minus 4ac. What is going to determine how many and what type of solutions you're going to have is just what's under the square root. So if you end up with just 0, you end up with just, or not, that was supposed to be a highlighter. You end up with just 0 inside the radical. Notice how we ended up with just 1 answer, 1 real answer, okay? But then down here, we had a positive number. And we ended up with 2 real solutions. Okay? But then down here, we had a negative underneath the radical, and we ended up with 2 negative answers, or negative imaginary answers. Okay? So the discriminant is just what's inside the radical, not the radical, just what's inside the radical. So this is what I was talking about. Graphically, that means one solution because it comes down, touches at that one spot. It's called a double root. Just comes right back up. We'll talk about that more in the next chapter with polynomials. Notice how the next one we did, there are 2 solutions where it crosses the x-axis. And then the last one that we did, it doesn't cross at all, okay? So one real solution, 2 real solutions, and then 2 imaginary. So the discriminant. This is not, whoops. Now I can't get rid of the highlighter. This is not a shortcut to what we've been doing, okay? This is not, oh, okay, this is another method of solving for zeros. This is strictly if they're asking you, tell me what type and how many solutions you're going to have. All right, so the discriminant is just your b squared minus 4ac. Okay, so if your discriminant is greater than 0, which means it's positive, you're going to have 2 real solutions. If your discriminant is equal to 0, you're going to have 1 real solution. And if your discriminant is less than 0, which is negative, you're going to have 2 imaginary solutions. Now, in your book, they might call it no real solutions. I want y'all to get in the habit of doing 2 imaginary. But then with us taking tests and doing delta math and edge elastic and stuff like that, I just wanted you to be familiar if they call it something different. So it's kind of cool how the quadratic formula works out. If I took away the square root in b squared minus 4ac, that's our vertex formula. The opposite of b over 2a. And then inside the radical, that's our discriminant formula. So it holds a lot of weight than just the quadratic formula. This only tells you how many solutions you're going to have and what kind, real or imaginary. So it's only going to be 1 or 2, and it's going to be real imaginary. Yeah.
So with imaginary solutions, like it doesn't actually cross the x-axis.
Right.
So how does someone come to the conclusion of, like, just logistically speaking, how would someone come?
Graphically, you can't figure it out.
Well, yeah,
But then quadratic formula, factoring, completing the square, solving by square roots, that will get your solution for
so
you.
what is the imaginary? What is it?
That is, so each one of these quadratics holds a solution, and when it doesn't cross, it's imaginary. It doesn't cross anything. That makes the equation equal 0. Just like, where does it cross the x-axis? Y equals 0. Well, if it doesn't cross the x-axis, we're still finding what makes the equation equal 0. It's just imaginary. Yeah.
So could you plug in, like on the last one, we got -2 plus or minus I square root of 2?
Uh-huh.
Could you actually plug that into your equation and get 0?
Uh-huh. As weird as that sounds. You would take the plus maybe first. And if you plug that in for each x, your equation should equal 0. It was like a full-blown math teacher versus English teacher argument in the workroom just a second ago. We were talking about the difference between the two. And I was like, the beauty about math, once you get an answer, you can plug it back in and get it right. And then the English teacher has the argument with us, well, the beauty about reading a poem, there's no wrong answer. And I'm like, then why was I counted wrong every time I was reading about a butterfly? And I said, it's about a butterfly. And they're like, it's not about a butterfly. And I'm like, yes, it is.
So it's my test.
It's the only wrong answer.
They're like, what's the best?
See, I can't do that stuff. That's just not how my brain thinks.
The only wrong answer.
Okay, so go ahead. This one says, and solve for the solutions. I don't want all that. I want y'all to tell me the discriminant, how many and what type of solutions you will have for each one of these. Okay. Discriminant, tell me how many and what type of solution you will have. So 1 real, 2 real, 2 imaginary. And then also what the discriminant actually equals. like I said, let it be a habit to put parentheses around your B value. Whether it's positive or negative, it doesn't matter, which all of those were negative. To get in the habit so that way you're not plugging in your calculator or in your mind the incorrect thing, okay? So the first one, if someone could tell me the discriminant and how many and what type. Okay.
The discriminant is 76 and there's two answers.
And what is the
There's two answers.
to what kind?
Really.
To real, okay? So I want y'all to be specific on real or imaginary. Don't leave that out. Good. Okay, second one. Anybody? All right.
The answer is
-7.
two.
To imaginary. Okay. What about down here, number 3? Okay.
0 and 1 real.
1 real. Okay. And lastly, is that the last one? Last one. You already answered one. Last one. Anybody? I'm a very impatient person. Yeah.
-63.
-63. And how many and what kind?
200.
2, okay, 2 imaginary. All right. So, like I said, this is not a shortcut to, aha, I don't have to find the zeros, okay? This is just telling you what type and how many you should have, okay? So when we were doing the problems before, all of these problems, automatically, I can look here and I could say, oh, I'm going to have 2 real solutions. I better have 2 real solutions, okay, and so on. So that's a good little check for you as well. Any questions on the discriminant? 1 real, 2 real, 2 imaginary. Any questions on those? So that would be something I would put on that one sheeter if some of y'all are making, okay? I'd have the quadratic formula, I'd put where you're getting those values from. I might even go to the extreme of, and yes, it is extreme. But actually color coding it. So when you plug it into x equals, and you're looking at the opposite of b, and then so on from there. Okay, so little things like that, writing it out. Probably after I got done doing the entire quadratic formula. Oh, I should have done that one. Nope, now I messed up. Guess I have to start over, huh? Do you think my virtual kids are still watching? I don't think so.
Probably stop watching.
They like to skip through a lot of stuff.
You're still watching like the video. Like and subscribe. Smash that bell.
Whew, there we go. Okay, so then I would probably turn right around and highlight or circle or acknowledge. That just lost all my color codes. So I'd probably just circle it or something like that to say, hey, everything inside here is actually my discriminant. So maybe off to this side, I would write b squared minus 4ac if it equals 0. It's one real solution and stuff like that, okay? I know that that method of study helps a lot of y'all out, so make sure, especially on a chapter like this with a lot of steps, that this is one of those you do that too, okay? So, any questions on quadratic formula or discriminant? Okay, remember tomorrow we're reviewing and test is on Wednesday. All right, let's go ahead and get started.